Today's Blindside features a short talk that Carl Benjamin gave at the Excellent Messages for Men conference, which was held in London, November 2019. The talk is about a short film by Vice India entitled Inside the Growing Men's Rights Movement in India, which he very effectively dissects, highlighting the one-sided and disingenuous narrative, bias, privilege and cognitive dissonance, which are all painfully presented on screen for some to see. I thought it would be interesting to mix Carl's speech with excerpts from the actual Vice film, and even if you have seen both before, I'd encourage you to watch to the end for the revelation that provides a bit more context to yesterday's Blindside about the metoo movement in India, and relates to a prediction Carl makes near the end of his speech, which all too predictably came to pass.
I found a video from Vice magazine India that I thought I'd cover, because this is something that it was like poetry, how the phenomenal self-own of Vice magazine. I really wanted to share it with you because it was something that really made my afternoon. So the video is called Inside the Growing Men's Rights Movement in India. Dun dun dun. And the description reads as follows. In the early 2000s, India started a push towards gender equality with new laws aimed at protecting women from assault and marital disputes. But as protections for women grow stronger, some men in the country have started to mobilize, convinced women make false accusations and use laws against their husbands as retribution. Now note the language here, right? Some men, but all women. It's not what they say either. They're obviously very, very sensible with their activism. They're exactly like you chaps, in fact. They begin with a fellow saying, and they begin at a men's rights conference in India, and it looks just like this one. And they start with a fellow saying, well, they believe that crime is only associated with men, and nobody is talking about men's issues, which sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? And then begins the narrator, who happens to be a male feminist. And it's weird hearing male feminist rhetoric in an Indian accent, I've just got to say. There's nothing wrong with it, it's just really weird. Actually, what I'm saying, there is a lot wrong with male feminist activism. The narrator begins like this.
In the US, the men's rights movement is largely contained within online fringe hate groups.
I mean, that's just amazing, isn't it? It's like, here's a well, here is a bucket of poison. Like, that's the worst intro to anything I've ever heard. But naturally, the presenter blames this on the patriarchy. Specifically, dowry laws, which in fact were antiquated at the time when they were outlawed in 1961. So how this is a problem, I don't know. But the main contention he makes, and this is the reason that men's rights activism is illegitimate.
Dowry is an antiquated tradition where the family of the bride makes payments to the family of the groom. It was technically outlawed in 1961 but continues undeterred to this day. And every year thousands of women are abused and murdered over dowry disputes.
Now, I agree that that's terrible. No one deserves to be murdered, obviously, but how is it that crimes that happen to a very, very small percentage of women justify creating laws that put all men at risk of false allegations? This is totally unjust.
In the 80s, stricter anti-dowry harassment laws appeared in India, and a men's rights movement began to form in reaction to them. And in the last few years, the movement has gained huge momentum following a surge of anti-rape and anti-sexual assault legislation.
In the case of rape, death has been prescribed as a maximum punishment.
Under these new laws, some men are claiming that false accusations from women are making them unfair targets.
But anyway, contradicting the description, the narrator says that the Indian men's rights movement sort of gained traction in the 1980s as a response to these anti-dowry laws. But the footage on the screen tells a different tale, because they're playing footage of men's rights protests. And man, these are really hard to disagree with. I mean, the banners that you're seeing say things like, husbands are not free ATM machines, end alimony. So, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Because this is a really just cause that they're arguing for, because the feminists are arguing for the emancipation of women from men. They want women to be able to earn their own money, earn their own property, and live their own lives as independent human beings. That's fine. Everyone agrees with that. But the converse of that is that men have to be emancipated from women. If women choose to make certain life decisions, there's no reason that the men should pay for them. And that's a perfectly fair contention. The narrator then says that within the last few years, the Indian MRM has gained huge traction because of a surge of anti-rape legislation. And again, these are really familiar stories because these men are claiming that they are the target of false allegations.
Including Vineet, who has recently been attending men's rights meetups after his wife filed abuse charges and took custody of their daughter.
Can you describe the cases that are on you right now?
There are 6 cases.
Yeah.
One is 498A. The
Dowry
wife-
harassment.
Yeah, dowry harassment, you
Okay.
can say. 323,
Which is?
causing harm. 377, that
Okay.
is unnatural sex. Carries a imprisonment of 10 years.
Okay.
So it's all on her testimony that she says that I had unnatural sex with her. So I can be arrested anytime. The first complaint was put by me. She did not put the first complaint. I made the first complaint to the police.
And what was the complaint you made?
That my daughter was with my parents-in-law and I wanted to meet my daughter. They refused me.
Okay.
So
So the police
that-
intervened, and the first time it was no trouble for you, and you got your daughter back.
I got my daughter back. But then, as a revenge, you may say, they just got all those cases on me.
And I was watching this thinking of David Silverman. If any of you don't know who David Silverman is, he was the president of the American Atheist Association. He was a male feminist, and he did everything he could to promote feminism. And then the false allegations came from women he had had consensual affairs with. The allegations themselves were transparent, in fact, paper thin, and anyone who was in any way familiar with this organization and this community could tell that this was malevolent. And in the case of David Silverman, it took these false allegations to absolutely ruin his social standing before he would then come and speak to me in an interview on my channel and say, okay, I admit, you were right about all of this. You know, you were right, we shouldn't have left the gate open to malicious actors who can level those false allegations and have no recourse, and the man being alleged can have no recourse against it.
My wife left me on 23rd of August 2017.
Yeah.
She left with my daughter.
So you have not seen her since.
At the time of recording, he hadn't seen his own daughter in over a year because his wife had left him before making these allegations, taking the daughter with him, leaving him with no other recourse. The worst part, though, and again, this is why I juxtapose this with the issue of David Silverman, is because this man had been a feminist activist. He had actively protested for this state of affairs until it had come full circle and he'd become the victim of it.
Because
I was a feminist until I knew that even the men can have problems.
Then we're introduced to Anil Kumar, who's the founder of the Save the Indian Family Foundation. A few people, I believe, are here tonight. Vice magazine smear him with the worst they can do. They say,
Anil has specifically looked to theories and tactics perpetuated by the controversial US men's rights leader Paul Elam to fuel his own movement back home in India.
We have to cut through and use the media in a culture that doesn't care about men.
And like those US organizations, SIF is known for publishing anti-feminist material.
well, if I'd known they were going to say something about feminism, I wouldn't have come, but... But they have an interview with Anil, and it's a really reasonable interview. Even the most damning extract is the least damning thing you can imagine.
So Anil, you are the president and founder of the Save Indian Family Foundation. Why did you decide to go about this?
Yeah, some amount of expression of men being falsely accused or men facing domestic violence,
Okay.
men being harassed in a relationship with women or being in a marital problem.
Anil is just straightforwardly says he helps men who are suffering from domestic violence, false allegations, or are being abused in the family courts. What can you object to? What could you... Yeah, exactly, big deal, In fact, this guy looks like he's doing a damn fine job.
Nowadays, we use internet.
How was it different?
Some of these guys made that breakthrough that, they are not ashamed in terms of sharing their experiences with judicial system or family problems.
But the people who are at the forefront of the men's rights movement, they are very vocal about women's roles in society. Women shouldn't vote, they should stay in the kitchen. And that's a legit thing that's a narrative that's out there.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not a fringe.
No, I'll tell you what. The main base is not that.
The host then complains about the fringe of men's rights activists who, quote, want to put women back in the kitchen. Now, he never shows any of them, and I've actually yet to meet any of these people, but this is something that we're told of. But of course, the male feminist doesn't ever substantiate this at all, and instead defaults to feminist rhetoric.
You know, when you say patriarchy or male privilege, we think that it is not as simple as if you are a man, you are privileged or you are powerful.
But they would be powerful in comparison to women, like what women have had to face.
We dispute that. Okay. On an average, we dispute that.
Well, don't you realize that men are more powerful than women? As if he is ignoring directly, when in the documentary, the mini documentary itself, he is ignoring the people who can't even see their own children and claiming that they are the powerful ones in the situation. So come on, if they had power, they would surely not be in this position.
सिस्टम में एक प्रॉब्लम सबसे बड़ी ये आ जाती है कि बिल्कुल अंधे हो जाते हैं वो जब आदमी की बात आती है ना तो वो बिल्कुल चुप हो जाते हैं बिल्कुल आप कुछ भी कहते रहो वो सुनने को तैयार नहीं होते
पर स्टार्टिंग में अभी बहुत ही वल्नरेबल कंडीशन है इस टाइम में एज पर नाउ अगर हम शमी का केस लें या कोई भी केस लें तो वहाँ पे वो डिक्लेयर कर देते हैं दैट ही वाज अ रेपिस्ट.
He is actively ignoring the evidence of his own eyes and defaulting to feminist ideological rhetoric.
So, how did you find out about SIF?
I was desperate to get some justice, so I googled it. They are one of the few people who are working for the men's rights.
So at this point, SIF is practically all you have.
Yeah, because for a layman like me, I'm not having any knowledge of the law. I've never been to a police station before. SIF has given me that confidence to at least speak up.
Power indeed. So we learn that when it comes to accusations of rape, the men are automatically guilty. Again, this is all sounding very familiar, isn't it?
Or he was
a SIF meeting, and we have a forum of men who claim that they are being harassed by the women they're separated from. So it's like an AA meeting, but like aggrieved husbands.
And he describes the host. The host describes the gathering, he describes it as an AA meeting of aggrieved husbands. It's like, so what? Like the atmosphere of this mini documentary is that these are evil men. It's like, no, these are men who have had an injustice done to them.
This chapter of SIF is run by Rupenshu Pratap Singh, whose primary job is to give legal advice to men who are in the midst of marital court cases.
On daily basis, we record this biasness in our society.
So you're working against biased laws.
There was more than 40 laws which are for women.
The host objects to the lawyer explaining that there are 40 or more laws that are created regarding women and none created regarding men. And his objection, and again, his objection is that...
But women do face violence per capita far more than men.
Let's just assume they did. That doesn't justify any of this. Then they have a cutaway, and it shows the levels of violence against women in India. They have nice bar graphs that come up. Oh, look, 300,000 women have got, various different, types of violence done against them. But it doesn't show the statistics against men, which plays into Anil's point that you're only looking at one side of the coin.
But in general, violence against women...
You are saying in general because you have seen only the one face of a coin.
Even this side of the coin seems very biased and anecdotal.
In their own documentary, they deliberately only look at the same side of the coin.
If you check about the NCRB data, you will find what is the true states and what are not.
While there may be enough men to fill in a room, like the number of women who have faced something like this, I'm pretty sure it could fill up this block.
You can't say that women are 100% legitimate.
And again, even if this is true, how does it justify creating laws that enable false allegations to be leveled? The framing is of a gender war from the male feminist, as if it's justified for women to take revenge in the abstract. The women as a group are justified in doing this to men as a group because of individual grievances. The host then meets with a Supreme Court lawyer and feminist called Karuna Nundy, Now, I've never heard of this woman before, but man, did she piss me off. She unironically said,
there's a pervasive sense of victimhood, which is very interesting to me.
That was at least original. Like, I had not heard a feminist in the West say that.
She is from Cambridge.
She sounded awful, and she sounded exactly that kind.
I think that sense of victimhood comes because they misunderstand feminism.
Oh. Well, I mean, we've got literally dozens of examples in a room where she could just ask them, why are you here? But she doesn't. She's figured it out. She doesn't need your opinion.
As being women against men.
Yeah.
Rather than people against patriarchy, which is what it is.
Which is wonderful because we've defined men outside of people now. This is like, if you're a man, you're pro-patriarchy, and you're outside of the group that is people. So congratulations for being actually unpersoned by a female feminist lawyer in India.
They believe that a lot of laws, like the dowry laws and the domestic violence laws, are framed in such a way that men are immediately considered as the perpetrators and never the victims.
Look, that's just a widespread myth, partly created by these men's rights associations.
She dismisses the pro-woman, anti-male laws as just a widespread myth. But you can't help but notice that she's speaking from a really privileged position, and she looks it. She's very prim and proper, in fact, Cambridge bred, as you can tell. And she's obviously in control. She's the one she's the one talking down to these poor men who are having their lives ruined. And she can't be put in their position. It is a demonstrable privilege. She can't have a false allegation made against her because of their law is exactly the same as our law. She just can't be the recipient of that. So she is speaking from an immunity to this thing and telling them, just deal with it. It's not your problem. You've got this wrong. I know, even though I am immune to this and can never be affected by it. She then says that the burden of proof is on the prosecution, so it's fine. But the proof is the allegation itself. So how is that fair?
Look, any system has false positives and false negatives,
course, yeah,
right?
yeah.
False positive is when somebody who is innocent is dragged through the criminal justice system, right?
Yeah.
Now, the false negatives in our systems are much greater, much greater than the false positive. Every single law is misused to a degree. Just because it's misused doesn't mean that it shouldn't be there. You know, we have to address the misuse, right?
And then she goes on to distinguish how there are false positives and false negatives, and claims that the false negatives affect women far greater than the false positives are affecting men. The false positive being false allegations of rape, and the false negatives being women who have been raped and are not being helped. But she does agree that we do have to address the misuse of these laws, which give false positives, which is what those men's rights activists are trying to do. That's precisely why they're there. However, she does recognize, she doesn't say it explicitly, but implicitly, this is a recognition that she has a privileged status in the status quo, and she wants to keep it that way. We follow the gentleman from the beginning who goes to the police station as the host does a piece to camera. This is the man who has his daughter stolen by his now ex-wife.
I met up with Vineet as he arrived at the police station to give his testimony, fearing that he'd be arrested on the spot.
So you're put in jail. Will SIF members come and help you out?
Sir, I guess they are the only hope that I'm having right now.
Okay.
So let's hope for the best.
So when I was told about this guy, I thought he would be a proper men's rights activist, like, you know, all women suck. He's definitely mixed up with the men's rights movement, but he's just a guy who's in trouble, and he's doing what he can to get his daughter back.
And the host says, when I met him, I thought he'd be a proper MRA, you know, all women suck. Yikes. But the thing is, even he's forced to admit that this is just a guy. It's just some guy who's down on his luck. And he's in trouble, not of his own making, and he's doing what he can to get his daughter back. And you can see it pierce through the ideology very briefly. because this guy is genuinely sympathetic. He's had his life ruined, and it's not his fault. He was the first person to go to the police and say, look, I'm being aggrieved. I can't see my daughter. And now the cavalcade of allegations have come. And he says that the only people helping him are the Save the Indian Family Foundation. No one else will come to his defense. Luckily, in this chap's case, he was actually released, but at the time of the documentary recording, he was due for a court appearance, so I don't know how it went. But we cut back to Anil.
There are a lot of victories, which I will call feminist victories. There are a lot of victories. When you have got a lot of victories, you have to bring grace. Every victory, if somebody gets more bloodthirsty, then it scares men.
Okay.
And that's a really fascinating point that I think that we really should emphasize more in our own discussion about the thing. They are winning victories, they are getting laws changed, and they are actually having an effect on men, which is what this absolute room full of people demonstrates. But they don't stop when they've won. You know, normally when you punch a man and you've got him down, you stop punching him, but they won't do it. They're still going.
It's troubling to see how a handful of cases, whether they're justified or not, could be driving such a loud minority of men's rights activists in a country like India.
I compare this with David Silverman because it's exactly the same pattern. One that we all recognize, we all know, and is well documented. And if you're a male feminist watching this, it's only a matter of time, man.
When in the October of 2018, Mahima Kukreja put out a series of posts on Twitter sharing accounts of anonymous women who had shared their stories about Utsav Chakraborty. They alleged that Utsav Chakraborty is a creep, he's a serial sexual harasser, he harasses underage girls into getting sexual favors out of them. The entire Twitter public, the entire social media audience believed her. It propelled Mahima Kukreja to a stage where she was featured by Forbes as one of the pioneers of the metoo movement in India. Cut to 2019, when Utsav Chakraborty has now come out with his side of the story, there are a lot of confusing accounts going around. The series of counter allegations between Utsav Chakraborty, Mahima Kukreja, they are sharing their own accounts of sexual harassment, fake proceedings on Twitter, has spread the drama to a level that was unprecedented. Utsav Chakraborty has now come out with his own side of the story, and the narrative that he has given is that all of the stuff that Mahima Kukreja did on Twitter last year was a carefully orchestrated vendetta against him. In the battle between who of these two is telling the truth, who is making false allegations, the entire Me Too movement has come into question in India.
Feminists genuinely do view this as a war on men. I mean, what is the patriarchy, if not the world order that has been created by men? What is it, if it's not that? Who promotes it, if not men themselves, unconsciously, unthinkingly?
On one hand, I sympathize with guys like Vineet, but I also see the threat that SIF and the men's rights movement here poses to the progress of much-needed women's rights.
They are, in fact, pro-woman rather than pro-victim. They don't believe that men can be victims, and they don't believe that women can be victimizers. And there are a million stories, a million examples that can demonstrate the opposite.
Almost a year after the accusations, a YouTube channel called Expose Mahima released an audio and claims to be the conversation between Utsav and the lawyer on 14th of November 2018. The lawyer can be heard threatening Utsav in the audio that if he releases screenshots of conversations which can prove his innocence, he can face dire consequences.
I have been informed that you've been speaking planning to release certain screenshots or something of that nature. She's been in touch with the Mumbai police as well as the National Commission for Women, who have been pressing her to file charges. It's only you do, but if you do put out something that is damaging to her without her prior permission, we may be constrained to file legal, criminal as well as civil remedies. We'll be constrained to actually
Utsav then asked what the remedies would be, to which the lawyer says,
the criminal remedy will be loss of reputation. Anyway, the FIR date, anyway, the Mumbai police has been asking or has been in touch with her, and whatever we deem fit.
The lawyer Mansi, who is also Mahima's sister, says that Mahima Kukreja will be happy with a public apology and him seeking a therapy. Utsav then tells the lawyer how the accuser's act has cost him his professional as well as personal life.
She has ruined my career. I have nothing else left. I have nothing. And the thing is, all the people who spoke up against, like after, and I understand her perspective also in that. Like what she did, she ruined my life completely. It is not, our friends have stopped talking to me, like close friends who have like, no, what about the other women?
But this is why I come and speak at men's rights conferences, because I don't consider myself necessarily to be a men's rights activist. I'm a human rights activist. But men's rights are human rights. And this is genuinely the difference between feminists and men's rights activists. Feminism is ideological. They are speaking in the abstract. They can be speaking to victims. Someone who is directly a victim of a woman using the court system and saying, no, you're not actually the victim, you're actually the oppressor. It's utterly backwards. Whereas the men's rights movement is empirical. You are looking at the evidence and saying, well, this is proof that there is a problem. Because it is. This is why I'm happy to call myself a women's rights advocate, but I would never, ever call myself a feminist. Thank you very much.
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.